We've got 6:33.
You're the judge,
Your Honor.
Your Honor.
Who's that?
You,
Me?
you got the sign up there.
Be careful, I got a gavel too.
You got the sign there in front of you.
Oh,
Oh. Hey, Matt, you snuck in.
it's not me.
Go, Matt.
You judging?
All right, the hour of 6:30 having arrived, why don't we begin our evening here with the Pledge of Allegiance? Jacob, would you lead us in the pledge tonight?
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, we'll start with the roll call. If you're here, say so. Nate? I should say also, if you're present by Zoom, say so as well. Nate? Brad?
Here.
Matt?
Here.
Bob?
Here.
Chris?
Here.
Dave?
Here.
And I am here. Nate is not. So if Nate shows up during the course of the meeting, we'll note that in the minutes, but a quorum is present. So we'll proceed to the next item of business, which is approval of the minutes from March 3rd. Is there a motion?
I'll make motion to approve minutes.
Moved by Chris. Seconded by Brad. Is there any discussion on the minutes? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right, those are approved. Item 5 on the agenda, we always reserve time on our agendas for members of the public who are present or who are logged in to make comments to the board. Is there anyone who would like to address the board this evening? Going once. All right, you're really missing out. Was that Nate?
Can you hear me?
Nate, is that you?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we got you. Nate is also
All
here.
right.
Now we have a super quorum. All right. Item 6 on the agenda is the meat of tonight's agenda, really, and that is our status reports. So why don't we begin with Jeannie on the communications and community support.
Can you hear me?
You sound,
If not, Alex could talk.
We got you.
loud and clear.
All right. So we've had a lot more action lately, and so we really have geared up with the fundraising, and we have some things ready to go out. We're just waiting for final tweaks to the brochure. I'm also going back and starting with making some case studies, and so revisiting those now that the snow is gone. So we have really the town square. We have nothing on the TID right now, but if some cool action happens, just to keep things like that in people's mind, it would be fun. And we also said goodbye to Kristen, and that was in the paper. And that was a nice party without cake. And am I forgetting anything, Alex?
I think that looks like it covers it.
Yeah. So, and every Friday now, Alex and I will be meeting either by phone or I might drive out to lovely Watertown. And so there'll be a proactive communication, what's coming up, what's here today, what's coming up. And so that we're not planning last minute anymore. So I think it'll be good. Questions?
Questions for Jeannie? I think the press releases, Jeannie, look fantastic. Really appreciate the format of those and how you've worked to establish such a good rapport with the paper. So much appreciated.
Thank you.
Item B, Common Council update. Chris?
So last time we met, we had an election, and the common council changed by one person. Jim Romline's gonna come on, and Linda Kilps for District 9 is gonna step off. New council assignments will be coming shortly. So, Bob and I may or may not be on. I asked to be on. Second thing I got to tour the library. That's coming along nicely.
seems to be on time and close to budget. One concern about that they had and expressed to me was that the town square is now kind of a phased project. I told them not to really worry about that, but I can see the concern, like, well, if phase 2 is a street, and well, maybe that'll make it easier to maybe not do it right away or ever. So I didn't really see that being an issue, and I tried to relay that, but that was a concern brought up, so now we all know. COVID's still a thing. It's getting better, but slight increase in active cases in the city. I think we're up to 40 now, which is the highest we've been since February, but I mean, we're not in the hundreds that we used to be, and vaccination clinics are happening every week. The city puts those on. I think 1 or 2 of the local pharmacies are doing them. You can get shots at some local doctors now. I got vaccinated. Not a big deal. Hope everyone else does too. Kind of related to that, this year, the Park and Rec Department, as far as I can tell, everything is planning to run as normal this summer. Pool is going to be open. Soccer and baseball leagues are planning on working at full capacity, so that's nice. Last big thing I got here, and I was just at the airport commission too. It was in the paper a couple weeks ago, Boomer Street realignment. If you're familiar with that, Boomer Street east-west portion of that, just to the west side of 12th Street. Airport wants to get that pushed further north, so the end of their runway has more clearance. So then they can advertise that, hey, we actually have over 5,000 feet of usable runway. Right now, they can't do that because there's a road there. So it's a slow process. They've been doing it for years and years. I just found out that that's gonna happen spring of next year now.
Wow.
So it's delayed again. It was supposed to happen this year. But when that does happen, it'll be a nice thing, because then our airport will be considered a level 1 or tier 1 or whatever the term is. But it shows up on a lot more maps, like corporations, if they want to fly somewhere, and their pilots look at a list of tier 1 maps because they got the big airplanes. Well, we don't show up on that until this happens. Then, like magic, oh, Watertown's got 5,000 feet of runway. We can land there. So that is an opportunity to spur possible growth in the future. It's been a long time in the works too, so it'll probably be, well, at least another year or 3 before that becomes a thing. And that's all I have.
Questions for Chris on the council or anything that they're related? Chris, anything from the election campaigns or the changes in the council that you think is particularly of interest for the RDA at all, or is it some support and whatnot?
The council's largely the same except for 1 member. Honestly, there's only 1 contested race, and Tom Patch from District 1 won that. So I don't see a large change in the thinking or strategy of the council, since it's largely the same. I think the council and RDA have played well together, so I see that continuing for at least another year.
Great. Okay, thanks. Item C, fundraising. Dave?
Yeah, so the fundraising team met once as Kristen was exiting, and then the mayor and myself and Alex met to kind of lay some ground rules and get or some vision for where we're going. And it was basically pushed onto Alex's plate, and been very impressed with what he has produced thus far. And it's an exciting opportunity. I'm not going to say a whole lot about the specifics of the plan, because I think that's probably on your radar for,
I could talk about it maybe
Okay.
after in
Perfect.
conjunction with it.
that sounds good. Then we are going to be having a meeting of the fundraising team coming up here very shortly. at that meeting, we're going to be talking about the current status of the donations and such. We've been reaching out to some larger donors, and hopefully we'll have some more concrete examples of what we have come across. We're going to be talking about any leads that maybe were dropped in the process of handing the leadership off, and get those assigned. And then set a really hard launch date for the public meetings and how we want to deal with communications. Also have an email from Brian Cons, who's on the fundraising committee, and he checked with the Watertown Community Foundation, and they've agreed to be the receiver of funds for the project. They also did this for the library. Is that the exact correct term for that? Receiver, yeah, okay. They also did this for the library expansion, and so so that will be where we'll be dealing with that. And then Brian also said that his company would be willing to receive the donated stock and bond investments for the project and forward to the foundation at no cost, and they also did that for the library as well. But other than what I've seen coming from Alex over the last few weeks, it's just been really super impressive, and I'm excited to see where we're going to move. This is personal opinion. I don't think the library has to worry about a phase 1 and a phase 2. If that's my Pollyanna glasses half full attitude coming through, well, so be it, but we're going to raise the money.
Alex, did you want to talk about the plan?
Yeah, sure. So I would just echo kind of what Dave was saying. I am kind of working to get together sort of a schedule for us and to do a more targeted fundraising campaign. I spoke with the mayor the other day a little bit and kind of questioned whether or not we could do a public-facing campaign sort of in a crowd fundraising style, and I think that would be beneficial for us. So I think that is one avenue. And I think that would also foster a lot of engagement within the community on the square itself. I see it as an opportunity not just to obviously raise funds to build the square, but also to start getting people emotionally invested. I think it's a really good opportunity from a marketing standpoint as well. So from my side, I'm just trying to organize this a little bit and put together a plan on how we can get a coherent strategy, I guess, moving forward for the fundraising team. So that's kind of where my efforts are at the moment for that.
Questions or comments from the board related to fundraising?
When are we gonna start taking funds in, and when can we see the numbers start to grow? When's that gonna happen?
So, yep, and I think it might take a week or two here for us to really hone in on a strategy, but I think the benefit in waiting to receive funds is that we can use those strategically. And I think there could be opportunities for not just making announcements and timing announcements with perhaps a schedule of the project square and things that might be happening on the project square, on the town square, excuse me, but also in terms of potentially using funds from donors as a matching grant. If somebody contributing wants to contribute and use that to solicit further donations in a matching capacity. So I think I can't really answer that question. I think it behooves us to just have a little bit of patience to get to a point where we can be strategic in how we use those. I guess that's the best answer I can provide.
There's at least a chance, I think, and maybe Dave and Nate can speak to this as well. I think there's a chance, given that window of time that you're looking at, that right about when we're ready to go live with the strategy, that we may have a large donor commitment in hand, Chris, that could be leveraged, I think, in the kind of the public announcement and the communications around it to help really get a good splash and a good head start. I should say a good momentum, not really a head start, good momentum out of the gate.
Yeah, I think that is likely the case, but again, I haven't actually met with the fundraising committee and the fundraising team, and I don't actually know the status of different outreach and donations at the moment. So, but I think as long as we have a set plan in place, I think the sooner that we can start receiving, the better as well.
Hey, Rob, this is Nate. I can definitely confirm that that will be the case. I've got to connect that donor with Alex. They had reached out to me here the other day, just looking for some dates and times. So I would fully expect that to be the case.
Great,
That's great.
good stuff. Okay. Anything else on fundraising? All right, thank you.
Oh, sorry.
Yep, Jeannie.
I think one of the things is on the brochure, we were a little concerned, like, are these really the numbers? Because they were sort of like moving targets. And Alex sent me something that looked like more confirmed numbers of how much the town square, right, is going to cost.
Yeah, yep. So we did, we updated, I believe everybody's seen the wonderful brochure that Jeannie did for all that. We updated some of the numbers on that, both from a cost standpoint and a couple of the other items on there. I don't have it in front of me, but yeah, we did kind of refine that a little bit. There were still some outstanding questions with that. I know, again, this is perhaps this is tied to fundraising and from other meetings, which I haven't looked back at all the RDA meeting minutes, amazingly enough, in terms of a question of how donation acknowledgement or donations would be acknowledged perhaps in the design of the town square. So I think that is sort of an outstanding item for either the RDA board to address or the fundraising committee to address, but that is something that we may want to consider as well.
Yeah. So I guess my point in mentioning it is that forget what you heard in the past, like, yeah, we're not sure. These are like confirmed numbers, so we're all on the same page now again.
So when that information is finalized and the brochures are ready to go, can you email those to each board member as well, so we've all got exactly the same message, same information?
Yeah, absolutely. And that should be done Friday, I think.
Great.
Mm-hmm.
Great, okay. You mentioned the crowdfunding, which I think is a great creative idea, and it reminded me of they did that at the contest in Great Britain. You remember this? A few years ago, where they had a naming contest.
Bodie McBoatface?
Bodie McBoatface for naming the
Yep.
boat. Happened to get the most votes. It got viral. So maybe we can go viral, but we can't name it Squarey McSquareface.
No. Well, there is an Irish influence in Watertown, maybe we should go for it.
I think
Yeah.
a community, maybe it was even Minneapolis, not to get too far off topic, but they had a snowplow naming thing, and they had Plowy McPlowface too. So,
Wow.
yeah.
All right, Alex, Executive Director update.
Yeah, so there's a few items here. I'll try to go through as clearly and quickly as I can. For myself, what I'd like to begin doing is, so one of my broader goals for not just the RDA, but in some of the projects that we have going on, is to just establish better communication with all the different parties. So within the RDA, I would like to start doing biweekly updates. That's probably going to be via email. So I'll just be sending those out to you on a biweekly basis. If there's 2 sentences to say, I'll maybe tell you a joke or something. If there's serious stuff, I'll bring that to your attention as well. So that's one thing I have on my plate. Another thing that was brought to light for me was perhaps looking at developing a more user-friendly budget or accounting ledgers so that we can do better at sort of determining our budget and seeing how that works. So I'm working with the city clerk to get access to that in a certain capacity and sort of clear that up a little bit so that we can use those a little bit better. That's what I have just in my relations with you. The town square has been a heavy item on my plate, obviously. And again, I'm trying to improve communication with our contractors, with our design group essentially, and with not just myself and the RDA, but also with city staff. I think that's really key. We have some really good people on the city staff, particularly the engineering department and one other individual sitting in the crowd out here, among everybody else. And they need to be involved in this to a higher degree than they have been. So we're working on that. Smith Group is also going to be doing a little different file sharing system so that we have a little bit more access to what they have. There are some documents in here which we hadn't had previously, which I'll talk about. I guess we could go right to that, actually. So in there, I believe the first one from them is their project schedule. This is a tentative schedule from them, which I don't believe we really had before. This goes up to construction, or up to releasing for bid, out to construction, and that's all we have so far, which is just progress. I just kind of want to draw your attention to a few things. Line number 5 in that, or excuse me, 15 in that sheet is sign selection by the city. I do have that as an agenda item further down, so we'll talk about that in a few minutes here. Line 32, which is Chapter 30, permit review and approval. This is the item that's associated with the potential delay for the seawall. So if you look at the dates there, that's 110 days. That's May 7th through October 7th is the window they've given to have that worked on. We met with Smith Group and the DNR, and their review team, the DNR's review team, basically said a Chapter 30, which is an environmental permit, they could review that anywhere from a week, or have that turned around from a week to 30 days. So that October 7th date on the far end of that timeline, that could be significantly scaled forward pending a requirement for sediment sampling in the river. So if there's dredging in the river, which we discussed, and it's still, the jury's kind of out on that, there could be an additional process which would take us 2 to 3 months beyond that May date. But it seemed like the DNR was indicating that we might not have to do sediment sampling, in which case, from that May 7th start date of that item on the timeline, we could be looking at anywhere from a week to 30 days, which would significantly speed things up, which would be nice. So I'm keeping my fingers crossed for that.
Question on that. So is that, it looks like that October 15th date is sort of the tentative goal for the releasing of the bids. So if that wetland permit or the Chapter 30 permit moves up by that stretch, does that accelerate everything by that?
They would.
Okay. That's good news.
Yeah, and I don't think going into that meeting with the DNR that Adam from Smith Group was anticipating that. I think he was sort of thinking perhaps it would be worst-case scenario. But it, from everything that Julie, I believe was her name at DNR, said, it looked like we would be in good shape. So I'm hoping that I'm not being too optimistic with that, but I just wanted to mention that. So I'm also working to create my own schedule in addition to this, modeled off of this, adding stuff, again, from the city side and things that we have. There are some items that are not on this schedule. So one of those, like I was talking about, trying to bring the city more involved from a communication standpoint, where we scheduled a pre-site plan review with Smith Group to look at their plans, as well as post-construction erosion control. And we'll be doing that next Tuesday, and that'll be here, well, that'll be virtual and here. And that'll give our engineering staff and Jacob and a few others from the city the opportunity to sort of look through their plans and be able to point out a couple things that maybe they didn't have on their radar. The idea is to preempt any further delays that they might have when they eventually come to the city for approval process. As well as, again, I've been extremely impressed with everybody in the city and the expertise that they have And I think having them looking at this plan will be very beneficial for Smith Group as well. So that'll be next Tuesday. We've also just today sent out some emails about putting down seed on the site, throwing some dirt down and getting grass seed on the town square site itself, so that over the course of the spring and the summer, it's looking a little bit better than just some gravel. So we're getting on that. That should be happening in the next week or two.
Alex, can I interrupt you
Sure.
just to circle back to that schedule again?
Yeah.
I'm just thinking, Dave, that if we're lucky and that Chapter 30 accelerates the time frame, then we have to kind of keep an eye on that from our fundraising standpoint too.
Right.
Because we have to have a pretty firm idea of how much we can spend once we go to bid. So that we're not, or if we don't really know, we have to structure the bids a certain way to give us the flexibility to make choices. So just something to keep an eye on.
Absolutely, that makes sense. So that's a perfect segue. So one of the grants that we've applied for is the DNR non-point source grant. I hope I have that title right. And the end date for that, the grant period extends until December 31st, 2022. And in another conversation between Smith Group and the DNR and myself regarding this grant, one of the concerns they had was because we've split this project into potentially 2 phases, there were some items on there which the original grant application required that would be in phase 2. So they had a concern whether or not the entire project would be done by that December 31st, 2022, in order to get the phase 2 items, which were bioinfiltration, some of the permeable pavement that's up in there, basically cleaning up stormwater, into the project in that time frame. So to that end, obviously Dave and I are committed to bringing this in one phase and doing the fundraising necessary for that. But that's just something to have on our minds as well, and that's a $90,000 grant. So $90,000 is not an insignificant amount of money. It's also in the grand scope of the project, it is what it is. But another item in our agenda, or another thing that I included in our item packets is the previous contract which was signed at the last meeting, which actually phased this project contractually. And I just wanted to bring this back because it phased not just the construction of the town square, but it also phased the design and the engineering. And right now, Smith Group is doing engineering only on phase 1 because they are not under contract to do phase 2. And it's all outlined in the contract that's in the materials. And I would recommend that we strongly consider amending this contract again to have them do design services for phase 2 basically as soon as possible. I think that's going to save us a little bit of money and allow us more flexibility down the line should we decide, or should we have the funds and decide to do this in one fell swoop. I don't know what the cost of that will be to add that amount to their design services. I can certainly inquire on that, but I would just strongly suggest that we consider that, to have them do that, rather than to have them go back, say we make that decision we're gonna go for phase 2, we have funds in August, then they'll have to go back to, I guess, a previous stage of their work and get back into design phase and do that type of activity. So that's a suggestion that I would bring to the board.
Is phase 2 the Water Street portion?
Yeah. Yes,
Okay.
excuse me, yeah. Phase 1 is the main town square, phase 2 is Water Street.
Gotcha. What's the thinking of the board on that?
You don't have to ask me.
Makes sense to me if it's gonna streamline things and save ultimately dollars and cents, knowing we're gonna do it.
Yeah, I mean, I think we definitely need to get from them what the cost would be.
Oh, yeah.
You know, so we can then build that into the budget. And I just think the thing for us that gives us the most flexibility from the sounds of it, and then if we raise the money, we're ready to rock and roll, you know? And as opposed to raising the money and now we got to stop because we're not ready to rock and roll.
Yeah.
That makes total sense.
What would be the procedure on that? Do we need to just ask Alex if he would contact Smith Group and then bring a proposal back for the May
Yeah.
meeting?
Yep, and then we can put it on as an action item on the agenda.
Okay.
Then we'll vote to approve it and then sign the contract.
If that's the will of everyone.
Right.
Are there any other questions around that? Okay. Moving on, we've got a probable opinion of construction costs. This is fairly itemized, in my opinion, anyway.
Slightly.
In a more recent conversation, I know there's been some concern about a 20% contingency fee that's been on pretty much every other document that Smith Group has given. In a recent conversation with them, they did say to me that they would be, as they start working through some of the construction documents, that number would go down. They usually end up in the 10 to 15%. So I think they have it high at the moment, but I think they have plans to bring that down. Additionally, one of our other conversations with the DNR, yet again, there was question about the use of a seawall versus use of riprap and sort of a more natural bank along the river. The DNR's preference is to not have seawall. However, there is an existing seawall there, so we have some standing to do that. But there's a possibility that we may incorporate riprap on the south part of the bank of that river, which would end up reducing our construction costs as well. That's something that's in the works. I just wanted to bring that to your attention too.
Does that impact the water, the interface with the water, the docks?
So I wish we had a plan up here. It doesn't. The dock would essentially stay the same. That would all stay the same. If north to south, if you're looking on that bank of the river, they have a seawall basically going all the way until the adjacent property. The thought is that that would go north to south along the property roughly halfway, and then the remaining bank to the adjacent south property would be riprap or a more natural bank. That's how that would look.
What's the downside to that? Why wouldn't we just do that anyway?
Yeah, I'm with you.
If it looks nicer and it's cheaper. why-
Yeah.
The structural deal?
Not really. I don't think it would affect the structure. I guess it would affect grading, site grading. In fact, that was the concern from Smith Group as a whole in terms of, because I asked, well, could we just do riprap instead of
Sure.
the seawall the entire way? And they said that would significantly change the design of the square because of grading issues. So they would have to,
You'd have to slope that.
grading issues and the ADA, the accessibility component of those beautiful winding paths. So that was a concern, but you're right. I mean, it would significantly reduce costs. So my best guess is that we will be doing that on the south bank, or the southernmost portion of that bank.
Could you define riprap a little bit?
Can any members of the public define riprap?
It's boulders about,
Jake,
Boulders.
about 3 foot diameter. boulders.
So nothing teens could pick up and,
No,
okay, thank you.
So yeah, that would reduce costs. We've also, I had a meeting between Smith Group and the adjacent developer to coordinate how their sites will integrate. There are some requests by the adjacent developer to possibly adjust the town square site, trying to be diplomatic here. in a way that may also reduce some of our costs. There's a lot of landscaping boulders along that site. It's possible that those could be removed, but we're still having conversations around that. So that's another area. They did also give after, well, I guess, are there any questions on, did anybody have a chance to look through all those wonderful items? I know you all read it.
One question I had is just
Yeah.
getting back to your comment about the city staff. I just know that at different points in time, people have kind of flagged for me this permeable paver thing as not necessarily a preferred approach.
Okay.
Because of the maintenance involved and the necessary to clean the grout in between to make sure that it actually is permeating and et cetera. So I just wanted to flag that for the engineering department, just to make sure that before we get too wedded to a certain approach, make sure that the city is actually going to support it and want to maintain it.
Yeah, that's a good point.
They do look great, though.
What's that?
They do look great, though.
They do look great.
Yeah.
I think there has been some discussion about maintenance within the city staff and
Okay.
some of that department too. So they definitely have that on their mind.
All right.
Smith Group also provided a bidding framework in which they listed out some alternate options. Should we decide to cut costs in certain areas, they priced those out for us. This is not at all a statement that this is what we're going to do. However, I do think it's helpful to have numbers in there, and just in order for us to be flexible and be able to adapt quickly, should need be. If you do the math on this, and I kind of did, their total numbers are different than on this bidding framework are different than their itemized construction list. Part of that is this bidding framework includes the cost of cameras, Wi-Fi, and speakers, which I know was a discussion at one point, which I don't think there was resolution on that. So that's another item that I guess we would want to consider too, is whether that's something that we want to include. I guess they didn't, the way that Adam phrased it was they didn't have those costs at those earlier times when it was presented, but now they do. So they included that in this. So I don't know if there's any discussion around wanting Wi-Fi and speakers and a camera system. Or I could maybe put together some.
That was
further
that
information
came
on
up from a design committee
Okay.
that did that. And there was a little bit of dissension and discussion on the committee. It really never
Okay.
came about.
You have to forgive me on a lot of this because it's not being privy to some of the conversations or how
Yeah.
things came about. It's been interesting to try and catch up and figure that piece out. And one of those is the seawall versus riprap and things of that nature, and some of those design considerations. So I'm still sort of playing a little bit of catch up, but
Sure.
that stuff is becoming more and more clear, and that's really helpful, Dave.
The one thing that I think we're all kind of concerned, well, I don't know if we all are, but it was a big point with the design team was the removal of the overhead lines on Water Street. And I don't know that Smith Group was going to contact Wisconsin Electric.
Yep, we talked to them. They're putting together a cost estimate for us, which should be by the 26th, I think.
Awesome.
Yep.
That's great.
So we will know that soon. There was also in the coordination meeting with the adjacent developer, T-Wall, I'll just say it. There was possibility for some synergy there in terms of removal of those lines. They may want that as well, going down Water Street. So that's a discussion that we're going to have with them at some point too.
Awesome.
Alex, if I can.
Yeah.
This is Emily. Were you guys just asking about Wi-Fi and security cameras?
Yes, that was,
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, so that's an item on the list for the Main Street Task Force. I think we would be looking at addressing that a bit more holistically than just the town square. But it's also, the police chief and I have also discussed the cameras that will be along the library and their accessibility for the town square. So without speaking too much out of school, I'm 99% sure that problem will be addressed kind of outside of the RDA, if that's the right way to say it. It's definitely a Main Street Task Force item, and you'll be on that task force, so you'll be able to carry back the message. But I think that will get addressed.
Okay, that makes sense. My only thought with that would be if any of the wiring or fixtures or anything associated that would need to be considered with the construction phases of the square, but if that, we can, I guess that'll be outside of the scope here. Thank you. Any questions on the bidding framework? So, one of the other items that, again, this is one that I don't have background on, is up, that Smith Group sort of needs resolution from the RDA on is the main town square sign. So there's a page that has 3 separate designs. They're very small, I apologize for that. These, I guess, were brought to the design or the steering committee at some point.
Correct.
And they said, or Adam from Smith Group said that there wasn't quite the enthusiasm level, I think, behind these 3. So he said to me that they would be happy to come back in front of the RDA or the design commission or steering committee, however that was structured, to refresh on what these options were or to look at new options. So I don't know, is that something that we would want to have happen?
You can remind him that he promised that in January.
Okay.
We would have, and there are some suggestions out there that came from the design team,
Okay,
but then the design team was kind of in their sunset period. So they were just going to bring that back to the RDA, but it was to be in January. So you can
okay.
light a little fire there.
So,
And he should have notes on the suggestions that they made.
okay,
I think they were leaning towards the first one, but perhaps incorporating some Watertown brick in the base of it. I'm not sure of that, though.
okay. Shall I go ahead and schedule them to come to the next RDA meeting?
I would
Or-
do that, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would, and I think they should at least consider what was done down on Sharp Corners as well. I'm not saying we should do the same kind of signage here, but I think we should think about, from a color standpoint or something that maybe ties these things together as bookends. So that's something for them to think about, because none of that was done during the prior
Okay,
thinking on this. But yeah, I mean, I don't feel ready for us to vote on any of this. We should have them come forward with some recommendations or something.
okay, that makes sense. They did mention this to me maybe 10 days ago, and the time frame that he was hoping to have this decision by was 45 days. So if this was something that they were supposed to present to us back in January,
Thought so.
they're going to have to wait till the next RDA meeting. So we can do that.
And to be clear, we're not talking about what it's called. We're talking about just the look of the
Correct.
sign, right?
Just, yeah, design.
All right.
Just to explain a little bit about what you're seeing here, the second one, the design committee felt it was a little tall and cut down the sight lines a little bit, although the angle of it was quite nice. And then the third one was to hearken back to the Watertown Plank Road a bit with that one. And then they also talked about perhaps on the backside, well, on the backside of all these signs, could either be, like on the Plank Road, it would be donations for a plank, the bigger donations might be listed there, or medium donations. And then perhaps on the, if it were more of a solid one, it would be the, what was the other, the kind of the what do we want to say, the nod to the former buildings that were there, just a little etching or something in the backside of it.
Okay.
Is the splash pad still in there?
Still in there.
On these it is, I know.
On
I
the-
thought I was knocked out.
Oh, it's still in there.
One thing we do need to get clarification on, though, and Alex, maybe this is something you could help us run to ground. There, at some point, somebody said, and I don't even know who it was, that splash pad from a stormwater standpoint or a water utility standpoint could only be used for X number of hours. And I don't know if that was X hours per day, per year. Is it averaged over the year? Can we only turn it on once a day for an hour? We need to really understand that. And so can you help us figure out who knows the answer to that and what we're supposed to know?
I can do that.
That would be
I think.
really, really helpful. Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard various figures thrown around as well.
Yeah,
So,
and I've never actually seen it in print, I don't think, so I don't know even where it came from.
yep. Are there any other questions regarding the square? Anything at all? Anything that I didn't cover that you'd like to have some insight on before we move on to the next? No? Okay. The next item you have in your packet is a tentative project schedule from T-Wall on their development. It is a working document, so to speak, or an evolving document, I should say. If you look at some of those dates, we are past some of that, and we are currently still negotiating the developer's agreement with them. The ball at the moment is in their court. They are still trying to work on some of their costs and still, I guess, getting a little bit more in-depth with their designs and their schematics. So that's something that's still going on. And again, I brought them together with Smith Group to coordinate, and I think that may have shifted slightly their designs, just in terms of, I think it's really important, and all parties involved, both of the contractors also feel that it's really important to have that interface between T-Wall's development and the town square be really top-notch. So they're going through a process to make sure that that happens. And I'll update you more as they solidify that a little bit more. Again, they've just started sharing files, so it's kind of early phases in terms of their integration.
Is there a time schedule for T-Wall? Do they have they said anything, or?
So what they've sent us is the item that's in the packet there.
Oh, okay.
It's the Main Street Watertown LLC is their company there, or their LLC. And that's sort of the timeframe that they've given.
Okay.
So they're looking to go, I mean, if all things work great, they would be looking to go out to bid first week of January and start construction the first week of February.
That is what this says.
And we would be looking to go out to bid possibly as late as October, but now maybe earlier. And do we have a sense from Smith Group when we would put a shovel in the ground then with that?
In terms of after the bidding?
After the bidding, yeah.
I thought they had 2 weeks after they put that out.
Maybe it's on the back side of this.
Yeah, double-sided pages. But if that's not, no.
So there'll be, the point, I guess, is there's a good chance there's going to be simultaneous work going on all over the place down there.
Also with the library.
Right.
I'm waiting on a call, actually from, I think it may have been an architect working with the library on their project to give me a little bit of a clearer idea of when they're going to be on Water Street. So it's going to be a busy 2.5 to 3 acres.
Right. Are we feeling optimistic about negotiations on the developer agreement? Is that you and Emily? How are we feeling?
I feel very optimistic.
Okay.
I think it's going to happen. It's just a matter of them, refining their costs and really refining their design. But they're getting deeper into that work, which I take as a really good indication.
Good.
And I would just add to that, I have talked more to Terrence in the last well, we haven't always spoken, but he's called me more in the last few weeks than he has in 2 years. So I take that as a positive that, the rubber's really meeting the road. And Alex has done a great job of staying in step with Nick and just kind of tapping them every so often to make sure that they're, that they have everything they need. So every time that they've met, I can tell because then Terrence calls me after. So I think it's going, I feel positive. I would be surprised, honestly, if it didn't continue to progress well.
Great.
Yeah, and again, not to be overly grandiose with how good our city staff is, but Jacob has been super on the ball with that one. Every time they reach out for anything, he's immediate. So I think we're putting our best foot forward. I think that's a really good thing.
And can you remind us again of what's the total capital spend that they're looking to do on the development?
The total capital spend, you mean project,
T-wall, yeah.
project cost?
Yeah, I can't remember, is it 10 million, 12 million? Does anyone remember?
I
I know
want,
it assesses out around 6,
yeah, 6,
2.
7. I
That's,
think.
okay,
Yep.
got it.
That's the assessed value.
Yeah.
And that's baked into the development agreement.
Got it. Okay. Exciting. Great.
Yeah, it is. Any questions on T-Wall? Okay. Move on to the next item, which is grant, a statement of support for future grant writing activities. We have a grant writing contract with Smith Group in the amount of $20,000, which they've used in various capacities. And there's a few more grants that are coming up, which they wanted to have, I guess, a statement of support from the RDA for them to do that. I clarified with them, this does not mean we're authorizing them for any more expenses. They have, they gave me the numbers on what, that $20,000 contract, they've invoiced $12,455 of that. They have around $7,500 remaining. With the grants that we have left to do, they're projecting that it would be $3,000 to $5,000 for them to do that, in which case we're still under budget. So I guess what they're looking for from us is just a statement of support for the grant writing. Can we do that?
Is there any objection? Anyone online have an objection? Sounds like they have our support.
Okay.
Yeah. If they need something in writing, just let me know.
The next to last item that I have from my side, I received a phone call from Town Bank inquiring about possibly participating in our revolving loan fund. I did talk to Matt about that briefly to get his perspective. And I think I just wanted to bring it to the board to see if we would be interested in expanding or interested in adding additional capacity to our revolving loan fund. Just thought I'd bring that to the board because I did receive that call and it was something that I hadn't considered prior to that point.
Matt or Nate, what do you all think?
Yeah, so, I mean, I think we talked about this maybe a year and a half ago, when we increased, all the banks increased from 100,000 to 200,000 each. And, you know, it's great to to get more money, but it's a liability to us. We're taking that money and lending it out, and sometimes they're in good circumstances, other times, you know, there's risk. And, you know, I think we want to limit ourselves on how much we do. And I don't know if we're there now with 600,000 from the banks. But I guess what we really want to know is what's the need? And, you know, how much of that risk are we willing to take? But then also I would go back to the original banks that have been supporting us from the beginning, because if they'd say, oh, we'd increase it, why let another bank from out of town participate in in this, you know, so I think there's a lot of things that we'd have to figure out before we'd say yes.
This is Nate. I think Matt makes a good point about getting a temperature on demand. You know, are there other projects out there that these funds could be used for that we think makes sense? I think that would be at least worth investigating, and then determining from there, okay, are there projects that we would want to get behind, and maybe let's then take the next step and understand how our current bank partners feel about that situation, lending to us, or us taking on more. Maybe then at that point in time, come back to the board and kind of share what we find out for us to make a more informed, strategic decision.
What's a good way to assess that demand?
Could we, maybe say, hey, we're wrestling with trying to determine if we should increase our loan fund and maybe open up, give people 30 days to present, maybe just a high overview of potential projects they would consider submitting to us, maybe a description with a associated or at least an approximate budget. I don't know. That's one idea.
I'm a little concerned. I get the idea. It was kind of where my head was going to, but then I think, well, it puts us in a difficult position of then having potentially access to fund it and choosing not to. We may have good business reasons not to, right? I mean, Matt, to your point about risk, that to me is the more salient issue, because, we've looked at our budget. We're sort of in an all-in budget towards getting this town square done, and we don't have a ton of spare change to be putting towards risk management on loan defaults. Am I thinking about that right?
Yeah, no, I think you're thinking about it exactly right. And I like the position we're in now. And to be honest with you, I wouldn't be in favor of increasing it from where we're at. That would be my vote at this point in time. Just because I think we are starting to see things revolve. And, the money's cheap. I mean, so 2%, that's what we're lending it out. I mean, banks are lending it out, not at 2%, but I mean, it's cheap. Interest rates shouldn't be a reason that people aren't investing. So then you go to so why aren't they investing? It's because there's a lot of risk, and that's why the banks aren't willing to do it. And, are they looking at putting more money into it than it's worth? Well, that puts us in a worse position from a risk standpoint. So I think we'd have to look at it very carefully. Even if there was a need, do we want to be do we want to be in that position? So.
Has there been a lot of default in terms of repayment?
Default? Or,
Defaulting?
no, there hasn't been any. Payments have been made on time, prepaid, so so far so good.
I'm just trying to wrap my head around the risk part of it. I'm not understanding.
How risky is it really?
How risky is it really?
Right, I hate to
I'm just
interrupt.
asking the question.
I think we gotta have your microphone. Again, people chatting on here. So-
I'm just trying to understand the risk part of it. To take on another 200,000, 100,000, 200,000 from town. But I'm just trying to understand it. That's all. Because I'm legitimately not there.
So, I mean, risk, it's a liability. It's more loans we're taking out. So, yeah, they're giving us money. We have to pay it back. We're taking it, we're lending it out, and, I think we've got a good process for making decisions on doing that. However, there's lots of things that go into, the economy turns around, and then you see defaults on loans, and, then all of a sudden, we've got all our eggs are in one basket, and they're all in properties in downtown Watertown, which is what it's what we're about, it's what we're supporting. But, you know, that's, you know, banks spread their risk out. It's not all on one street, you know, it's, so.
Yeah. I can appreciate that.
I guess I would invite to, and all of that makes sense. Are we, the goal of the revolving loan fund, would an additional amount further that goal in terms of just a higher level thinking? Are we already accomplishing what the vision of that is with the amount that we have? Are we doing what that fund is intended to do already? I don't know.
I look at all the things that have happened on Main Street because of it, and, you know, because of people that have taken advantage of it, and also those that haven't taken advantage of it, but they just see their neighbors doing stuff and do it. And I think it's been, I think it's exceeded my expectations. So I'm happy with where it's gone, what it's produced. So far.
Okay.
I'm not a
think,
banker, sorry, Rob.
Oh, go ahead, Chris.
I'm not a banker, but wouldn't adding another bank kind of further spread the risk out? Say they don't want to throw another $200,000 in a pot, but as the loans get repaid and as we start to give out more loans, having a fourth bank as part of our $600,000 pot, is that a good idea to have a fourth bank to kind of spread out the risk between four instead of three?
The bank's not taking the risk, we're taking the risk, the RDA is taking the risk, so,
Okay,
no,
Okay.
it doesn't.
see, I'm not a banker.
If there's a default, we are on the hook to the banks, the RDA is on the hook to the banks. The banks aren't gonna write it off, they're gonna come after the RDA.
I follow.
What's the current balance of that we have available? Is there anything?
Off the top of my head, I think there's maybe like 30,000 available. But we
Because
should
only,
be able to-
it's on March 31st balance sheet, is this loans receivable? 470,000?
We do have, I am anticipating a payout fairly soon, or closing out of one of those loans fairly soon, which would kick a little bit more back in there. But this is one of the things I'm trying to get a little bit more clarity on, is how to present these budgets to you all as well.
So if there's a $470,000 loan receivable, there's 600,000 available, and if I had to guess, there's probably $100,000 that hasn't been funded yet, that has
That's
been
available.
earmarked, so.
Oh, earmark?
Earmarked already, yeah.
Oh, okay.
For projects that have started and not totally funded.
Okay,
So, I mean, that's my best guess without having the numbers in front.
sure.
And Matt, that loan receivable number, I'm looking at the February sheet, and it has 448,000 and change. So it's same neighborhood, Dave, is what you were looking at. So that loan receivable number, that's the amount that the RDA is theoretically on the hook for if all of those people defaulted on their loans. Is that the kind of the outstanding balance number?
Correct.
Okay. Yeah, and that's, I mean, you know, it's something we have to keep our eye on, I think, as a board, because, I mean, we look to you and to Nate for your experience as bankers. I'm sure it's not typical that you would say, well, then we need to have dollar for dollar reserves set aside to pay that all off, because nobody's going to have everybody default on their loans.
Right.
But we also, we can't run the checking account all the way down to zero, knowing we've got $400,000 of liability sitting out there. Well,
I think people got to remember too that Matt's team did a really good job structuring it. Doesn't guarantee us until we collect, but the loans that we put out were well collateralized. Liens were perfected, which, a lot of positions, there's equity in those properties that, we can access. And so, to your point, Rob, it's not necessarily to have dollar for dollar. In fact, I know there was one note that was a concern. It was kind of borderline, and part of the money that we have, we set aside, not dollar for dollar, but a decent portion of it as a specific loan loss allocation to that loan. So I know we've got some board members that have changed out, and people might be listening to this, but again, we engaged professional bankers to structure loans and loan losses, based on best practices. So I think we're in a really good position. In the notes that we have, honestly, those are all notes that could have went to a main bank. And that's, I think, when Matt talks about exceeding expectations, we thought we'd have opportunities maybe that banks wouldn't fund. And I can't really call maybe but for one, a loan opportunity that a bank wouldn't have done.
Well, I think if we're going to consider expanding, then we're going to need Matt and Nate to be willing to kind of put together a bit of a plan and a recommendation to the board, but only if you think that's worth your time. And so maybe we should just pause here, and I guess I'd ask if there's a motion to have that happen, somebody should make the motion, and then we can second it and talk about it. But if there's no motion, then we just will proceed business as usual. Does that sound fair to everybody? Does anybody want to make a motion to explore this further?
What would it hurt?
So Brad moves
Yeah, I'd so move.
I'll second.
and seconded by Bob. Is there any discussion?
Is it worth your time, Matt?
This is up to
I
Matt.
don't know. What do you want us to do?
Well, we need you to take a look at the risk and the potential demand of opening it back up and come back with a recommendation as to whether you think we should do this or shouldn't.
I told you how I feel.
Maybe we're ready to just vote on it tonight. Nate, are you going to want to take a look at it? Or do we want to just make a motion and vote?
Well, I like exploring it. I don't think we're committed to having to make a decision by maybe better understanding the situation. What I mean by that, I guess in my mind would be, I like to understand what Town Bank is really trying to offer us. So I understood, but I don't know if I know what they're offering. Maybe they told that to Alex and he could share that. But one, I'd like to understand that, I guess. Two, I guess we look at our portfolio and talk to our borrowers. I mean, our idea on this is that we wouldn't, fund them over 10 or 20 years. We were hoping there'd be a point in time to go out and refinance it. I know rates, are still pretty low. So I guess maybe it'd be worth asking our borrowers, do they have plans of doing that? So we understood maybe what money was going to be coming back in. Because if that's the case, if 2 or 3 borrowers just think they can pay this off or refinance it in the very near future, maybe we don't need more money. We can keep using the money we have. I guess that'd be my thoughts about what legwork we could do. I guess at this point in time, I don't have a decision about should we or shouldn't we. I am open to learning more to better inform that decision.
If I understand the motion, that's the motion on the table, is to explore this further. Alex, you would need to be the point on it, but I think Alex would need either Nate or Matt or both of you to help come back to the board then with a recommendation.
Yeah, and I'm willing to help. I'm just saying that's my, I think, I just think we have to be careful, with what our mission is, what we're here to do. And yeah, more money sounds great. Is that what our mission is? Is that what we're supposed to? I don't know. So I'm willing to work with Nate. I'm willing to work with Alex and come back with a recommendation. But
Nate, you good with that too?
Yeah, if I was sitting down, working a plan, maybe we identify a couple of key things. I would say that's not going to happen by the next board meeting. I think this is something where someone should communicate back to town bank that we're exploring our options in the next 90 days. We'll come back with additional information to the board and to them. I think 90 days. I mean, unless, Matt, you want it to be a little bit longer. I mean, I don't want to make this too long, but I also don't want to turn this around in the next 30 days. I don't think it's like a high priority, like it has to happen.
yeah, I think 90 days is fair.
Okay, so the motion has been made and seconded. Is there any further discussion on it?
I just want to clarify from the side of bringing this in the context of town bank. They're not offering anything. It was more of a very, very, very soft inquiry in the context of them looking at expanding into another market. And this was sort of their inroad into that. So there was no offering per se, but them bringing this subject up, I thought it was a good opportunity at least to, unfortunately, make more work for Matt.
Well, in light of that comment, I mean, it still is fine based on the motion that's on the table for exploring the fund, but I guess I would say maybe we'll just start with that and leave it up to Alex, Matt, and myself after we have this preliminary discussion with town bank to understand what they're looking to do. We may just end it there because if they're not really interested, it doesn't make sense for us. I mean, there's no reason for us to dig any deeper into our portfolio currently. There's no risks that are driving that. So just as long as we have the flexibility to kind of, maybe shorten up this exploration based on this initial conversation.
Brad, your motion, you good with that?
I'm good with it.
And Bob, you seconded it? Yeah, he's nodding. Sounds good. Sounds like a plan. Okay, all those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Okay, motion passes. Thank you. Thanks, Pat.
I believe my last item, finally. The city clerk and treasurer would like to be removed from the RDA charter as the RDA treasurer. I believe she had some misgivings about the language that was in there in terms of the role that reflects for her. So I would guess that could potentially be shifted to me as RDA treasurer.
I would think so. Why don't we work together on this one between now and the next meeting, just to come back with a proposed revised charter language,
Okay,
so that we can get you put in there and the clerk taken out.
okay. Could do that.
Perfect. Anything else, Alex?
That's it.
That's all?
That's it.
Good job. Thank you.
That was like the shortest director's report we've ever had.
Item 7, we have our January, February, and March financial reports in front of us. Does anyone have any questions before I ask for a motion? I'll just add that Alex, as he mentioned, is working on some improvements to the way that these are presented. It's not that they're not accurate, it's just that they're coming out of a system that, unless you're a municipal clerk, you have a hard time understanding what it's telling you. So we're going to try to translate it into something that we can grasp. But with that being said, is there a motion to approve?
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Moved by Chris, seconded by Dave. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? All right, the financials are approved. Item 8, let's look at our calendars. When are we going to meet next? Actually, I skipped item 8, possible future agenda items. I'm sorry, everybody. Put your calendars down. Anyone have any possible future agenda items you'd like to make sure we cover? Anyone out in the crowd? Okay, all right. So when are we going to meet next? Mid-May. How does the 19th look for everybody?
Good here.
Does it not work for anyone?
And I would just, I mentioned to a couple of you walking in here, technically, the court has this room reserved till 7. So if we start at 6:30 still, I guess we could run the risk of delaying the meeting. So I don't know if we want to look at 7 as a potential start time. But something to think about.
What do you think, Chris?
I like 6:30. I mean, we can pivot and use a different room if we have to.
Good.
It's
And we haven't really had any
not really been an issue. There's
far. So.
There's not a backlog of court cases because they had been shut down for COVID for a while, but they're caught back up, so I don't see much of a risk.
All right, let's stick with 6:30 then. And we're going to meet on the 19th. And if court's in session, we'll watch Judge Judy or something. Judge Mark. Judge Mark. All right, is there a motion to adjourn?
So move.
By Brad, seconded by Chris. All those in favor say aye.
Right?
Aye. We're adjourned. Thanks, everybody.